Hello, everyone. Hi, I'm glad you're here. Welcome to Tea and Gemstones, your podcast home for anything and everything to do with jewelry, gemstones, and precious metals. We talk about royal jewels, the psychology of diamond shapes, analyze red carpet looks, and dive into all things historical. To take you on these sparkly auditory journeys is me. I am your host, Jennifer. This episode you just started is the conclusion of a 4-part series called A Casual History of Gold. We began the series with episode 1, where we looked at the big picture as we addressed some fundamentals. Where does gold come from? I explain this seemingly simple question with a great deal of nuance and metaphors. But to summarize the answer, gold probably comes from stars going boom or stars going smash. That's my explanation, and my 4-year-old would really love and adore it, and honestly, maybe I should try to explain more of my complex science scenarios through a toddler filter. Once gold got to Earth, humans started finding it, and we loved it instantly. We've discussed how mankind across time, culture, and location has always attributed a reverence and valuableness to gold, naming the special metal with words meaning skin of the gods in Egypt, blood and excrement of the gods in South America. Gold has been used to craft the objects that mean the most to us, those items associated with religion, royalty, and romance. Humans then started putting gold to work. Can't just sit in a temple as a pretty idol statue anymore. Well, you can, but hey, gold, you've also got to go to work. Coins enter the world stages and economies are forever changed. Get it? Coins changed? Okay, that joke was bad. But also, it is a bit of a downer that along with gold becoming the basis of wealth, powerful European nations follow their gold lust across the Atlantic. Episode 2 of the series examined the collision of Spain's desire for colonizing and conquering upon the indigenous South American civilizations. There really could not have been more opposite viewpoints on golds, and they clashed with tragic consequences. Gold is a powerful motivator for the exploration and development of the 2 American continents, and in the most recent episode, episode 3, we talked about the exploration not of physical land, but of scientific and philosophic possibilities that could be unlocked by the human mind. It is fascinating how different cultures all over the world, Asia, the Middle East, Egypt, the Greco-Romans, and Europe, all fairly independently endeavored to create gold, and I still marvel how this art of alchemy, which sought synthesized gold and artificial eternal life, led to a plethora of true scientific achievements and the establishment of the modern profession of chemistry. Whew. So, for this 4th and final episode in the Casual History of Gold series, I wanted to look at gold's involvement in history a bit closer to home. My home of North America and my country, the United States of America. What part did gold play in helping the USA become a country stretching from sea to shining sea? What thanks do we owe to gold for the multicultural melting pot nature of our nation? And is gold the answer to any economic problem or the cause? Plus, Americans just really love shiny jewelry, right? Let's dive into part 4 of A Casual History of Gold, Red, White, and Gold. In terms of natural resources, the United States is a treasure trove. We've got vast amounts of coal, copper, lead, iron, natural gas, timber, and uranium. Lots of the valuable and functional stuff a bustling world power with a population of nearly 330 million people needs. So, where does gold fit in? With a resource like coal, it's pretty straightforward to see how coal contributed to the development of America, literally fueling the Industrial Revolution and all that jazz. Gold has first been found in Virginia in 1782, but not much, and for some reason, people didn't pay the discovery much attention. Fast forward a little bit to 1799. In North Carolina, a 12-year-old boy named Conrad Reed found a 17-pound yellow rock in his family farm's creek. Conrad brought his discovery to his dad, John Reed, and Reed starts using it as a doorstop for his front door. 3 years later, Farmer Reed showed his doorstop to a jeweler friend, and his buddy was like, "Hey, I think that's gold." And Reed is like, "So what?" And the jeweler offered to buy it and told Reed, name his price. Reed suggested $3.50, which was about a week's worth of wages. The jeweler agreed, paid Reed, and took the gold rock with him, and he promptly resold it for $3,600. Reed decided he should do some more investigating of his farm's gold potential, and he opened the United States' first gold mine on his family land. Right after he opened the mine, one of Reed's slaves found a 28-pound gold nugget. Hopefully, Reed got better business advice about a selling price than what he let his doorstop go for. Local newspapers reported on the gold discovery, and farmers all across the Carolinas started dedicating their off-season from growing crops to mining their properties for gold. At first, American gold mining was a really down-home operation, literally people digging in their backyards or panning their creeks in their spare time. But word of the Carolina gold was spreading all over the world. In southern England, a class of miners had honed their skills extracting copper and tin for decades, but those deposits were now running empty. When word of the American gold deposits reached those English miners, a lot of them left and immigrated to North Carolina. They brought their generations of mining expertise with them and gave the American gold mining community a super boost of knowledge and skill. And there was plenty of work because just 3 years after Farmer Reed and his golden doorstop, gold was discovered in the neighboring state of Georgia. Unfortunately, it wasn't on a farm this time, but instead on Cherokee land, which, on brand for American history, was overrun, and big air quotes here, claimed by white settlers who swarmed in and established mines. So much Indian land was taken for gold mining, the land grab is marked in history as the Great Intrusion. The Cherokees, understandably, were not happy about being pushed off their land for mining operations. The tensions over the gold mines in Georgia contributed to the overall anti-Indian sentiment in the government, and in 1830, President Andrew Jackson signed the Indian Removal Act in 1830, aka the Trail of Tears. In episode 2 of this series, we talked about the devastating consequences heaped upon South American indigenous peoples when foreign settlers came seeking gold. And sadly, the Indians of the United States Southeast were not an exception to the violent trend. The Indians tried to fight the Indian Removal Act in the Supreme Court, who actually sided with them at first, but then overturned the ruling the next year. The Native Americans were forced out and gone, and Georgia hosted a gold lottery and gave away the Cherokee land in 40-acre parcels to miners. And the miners sure got busy. They mined up so much gold that in 1835, President Jackson signed into existence new branch locations for the National Mint to make coins from all this new gold, with locations including Charlotte, North Carolina, and in Georgia. The rapid establishment of an experienced mining force meant that in 1849, these East Coast miners were primed to lead the charge into sunny California. The American dream is a concept at the center of the American identity. People journeyed across the Atlantic into the unknown to try and make a better life for themselves and their families. The dream was rooted in hard work, the hustle. If you work day in and day out, your wealth will increase bit by bit, year after year. But the discovery of gold in California morphed this concept of the American dream forever, changing it from a lifelong process of a dedication to hard work to the new dream of a burst of instant, fabulous wealth. The mindset shifted to seeking out a lucky big score, which would set you up for life without the hard scrabble hustle of daily work. But how did people discover that there was gold in them there hills? How did all that kick off? In present day, we call California the Golden State, and their slogan is Eureka, meaning I found something, and that something was gold. How was that gold first found? Well, the land area we call California has been in the hands of a couple different nations. Spain claimed the area first, and in 1821, when Mexico won independence from Spain, Mexico got to be in charge. Mexico didn't develop the land much beyond setting up some missions to, quote, make civilized Christians, end quote, out of the indigenous peoples. We first have a record of gold out of California from March 9th, 1842, when a farmer/rancher named Francisco Lopez was hiking to look for some runaway horses. He stopped at a riverbed to dig up wild onions for a snack, and he found some gold nuggets instead. He sent the pieces off to the U.S. Mint for authentication, but word of gold in the wilds of Mexican territory didn't spread. Lopez set up a small local mine around the river, but he did it really quietly. No rush was triggered. 4 years later, in 1846, some Indians at one of the Mexican missions found some gold, but the friars kept it a secret because they too wanted to avoid a gold rush. A whole bunch of settlers and prospectors frenziedly descending on their land was not what they wanted. But gold can't stay hidden forever. And while the California Gold Rush is an enormous cultural and historical event that rapidly changed the lives of hundreds of thousands of people, the phenomenon originated with some guys just trying to build a town in the wilderness. The man who found the gold that really started the California Gold Rush was named James W. Marshall. He had been born in New Jersey in 1810. When he was 24, he left home to seek adventure in the West. Unfortunately, the adventure he got was malaria. He was living in Missouri and having a really hard time feeling healthy after getting sick. His doctor suggested Marshall move farther west to nicer weather. So Marshall took a train to Oregon, decided he didn't like Oregon weather, and he finally ended up in a newly founded agricultural settlement in California called Sutter's Fort. Marshall became friends with the founder of Sutter's Fort, a man named John Sutter. Quick bio about John Sutter. He started life named Johann, and he was born in what's now Germany. When Sutter was 21, he'd married a rich widow and proceeded to quickly spend so much of her money that he was about to go to jail for debt. But he skipped his trial and took his wife and 5 children to America under his self-stylized new name of Captain John Sutter. He wasn't in the military. He was lying. He just liked having the title. He had some pretty colorful travel adventures all over North America, including living in the Kingdom of Hawaii for a while. Sutter ultimately ended up in Mexico, getting permission from the Mexican government to start a settlement in California he claimed would be an agricultural utopia. He got permission granted and he set up Sutter's Fort. Now, Sutter, he is an atrocious human being who committed truly heinous human rights atrocities against the indigenous people who were already living on the land he was, quote, given, unquote. He treated them like slaves, locked up on his property as laborers. He gave Indian children away to friends as gifts. yeah, not a good guy. Well, Sutter had this land and he was trying to build and develop it. When James Marshall arrived, Sutter hired him to build a water-driven sawmill on the banks of a river. While the sawmill was under construction, Marshall went to inspect the water wheel and found a few nuggets of gold caught up in the spokes. He took the nuggets to Sutter, and they actually went and got an encyclopedia to read about gold to see if that's what they really had found. Sutter expressed great concern that a gold rush would destroy his utopia in the making, and he tried to keep the discovery quiet. But there was a man in Sutter's Fort named Samuel Brannon who owned a store that sold supplies, and he also had a newspaper. Brannon wanted to make money, so he published the gold discovery in his newspaper. Also, apparently Brannon took a jar of gold and walked up and down the streets of nearby San Francisco yelling, "Gold! Gold from the American River!" So that'll get people's attention. Larger newspapers and East Coast papers picked up the story, and it was on. At first, it was local people in California and the neighboring Oregon deserting their everyday lives to go look for gold. Samuel Brannon, after he published his first paper about finding gold, couldn't publish another issue for a long time because all his workers quit and went mining. But he sold mining supplies out of his store at a massive markup to the influx of people. Brannon had purchased pans and spades, shovels, for 20 cents each, and then he sold them for $15 each. In 9 weeks, he made $36,000. On December 5th, 1848, President James K. Polk confirmed the massive gold discoveries in a speech to Congress. At this time, the United States had won the Mexican-American War, and California was a territory, not a state. But people from all over the United States and abroad were headed for the California mines. 1849 was the biggest year of immigration to California, hence the nickname the 49ers. People poured in from Latin America, China, Australia, Turkey, New Zealand, France, Italy, Germany, Mexico, even some African nations. 90,000 people came to California in 1849. In 6 years, there would be 300,000 people. For a point of reference, in the year 1847, San Francisco had only 500 people. Scores of boats arrived on the California coast, and they were just abandoned because not only did the passengers disembark, but the sailors and the boat crew ditched the ship and went ashore too. California didn't stay a territory for long. Gold was a powerful motivator for obtaining statehood, which California was granted in September 1850. It wasn't all good news on a very local level. Sutter's fears came true. His little Sutter's Fort was totally overrun by huge crowds of people and squatters, and his livestock was poached and buildings torn down. His fields of crops were emptied and trampled. Sutter actually tried to appeal to the United States government for compensation for what was done to Sutter's Fort, but he never received any money. He was broke. But the fact that Sutter didn't make it rich off the gold rush seemed exactly like what he deserved for all the awful things he did to the Indians. James Marshall did not benefit from the gold rush either. His sawmill project was a failure, and hordes of prospectors pushed him from his land. Marshall subsequently tried in turn to start a vineyard and then his own gold mine, but nothing turned a profit, and he died penniless. On the micro scale of personal individual stories, the gold rush in California was brutal and harsh. The California gold fields were lawless places, with violence as the preferred method to settle disputes and claims. Once the easily accessible gold was panned out of the rivers, the business of extracting gold from deeper in the earth was messy and difficult, fraught with hazards. Many of the 49ers who mined never made enough money to have a big score and never work again. But the businessmen supplying the equipment for the dreamers, they made bank. One example is a Mr. Levi Strauss, who first started his denim empire by selling overalls to miners in San Francisco in 1853. But the huge influx of people immigrating into an area at warp speed brought with them equally tremendous development of towns, roads, infrastructure, railroads, and not just for California. A 2017 study by the Journal of Economic History states that the economic expansion of the California gold rush led to 15 years of steady, recession-free growth for all of America. Let's look to the north, the wild, untamed north of the Alaskan Territory and the Yukon in Canada, just to the east of Alaska. In the area of the Yukon, there is a region called the Klondike, which is particularly wild. With no real roads, the only way into this land was to go up rivers in boats, and only in the summers when the temperatures were above freezing. The landscape was varied with mountains, valleys, dense forests, and wide open exposed tundra. The native peoples shared the land with bears, moose, and wolves. Needless to say, the climate was nowhere near as welcoming as sunny California. So how in this inhospitable landscape did gold come to be discovered? Who was poking around the Yukon? Well, let me introduce you to a man named Ed Sieverling. Ed Sieverling was born in 1847 in Pennsylvania. He was a restless, curious man who history paints as being just compelled to seek out precious metals. There's a quote directly from Sieverling: "I never wanted to be rich. I just wanted to get close to the earth and see Mother Nature's gold," end quote. Same, Ed, same. Although I would like to be rich. Ed and his brother had discovered silver in the Arizona Territory and founded the famous city of Tombstone, Arizona. He had also tried prospecting in California, but he was not successful there. Sieverling loved maps and geology, and he had a belief there was a continental belt of precious minerals that striped across and up the North American continent. After coming up empty in California, this continental belt belief led him to lead a prospecting expedition up the Yukon River in 1882. He found some gold nuggets, and because of Sieverling's tremendous jackpot with silver in Arizona, his gold discovery got a lot of publicity. Hundreds of hopeful miners followed Sieverling's route up the river. Sieverling, himself already extremely rich from his Arizona success, did not think the 50 degrees below zero temps of the Arctic were fun. It wasn't worth freezing to death to him. He declared Alaska impossible to mine, and he went home to his mansion in San Francisco. But to a lot of other people, gold was worth the risk. After Sieverling left the North in 1883, the North was fairly quiet. Prospectors continued to follow the rivers and stake claims. Several small boom towns would burst into life over a spring and summer, only to vanish come winter. Now, in this time period of the late 1880s, communication and travel still isn't that quick, especially somewhere far and remote like the Yukon. In August 1896, a small group of prospectors went down a tributary of the Klondike River called Bonanza Creek, and they found absolutely massive amounts of gold. Every local-ish miner and prospector anywhere in the Yukon swarmed upon the newfound bounty. They came up the rivers on boats or across land via dog sled. But because this discovery happened over the North's harsh fall and winter, word of the new gold found didn't really leave the Yukon. But whoa, when the ports and rivers unfroze come spring, oh my. The prospectors who had been mining the Bonanza Creek all winter started sailing into ports like San Francisco and Seattle with their bounties. The first ships from the Yukon miners, they docked on July 15th, 1897 in San Fran. These two ships were named Excelsior and Portland. And get this, okay, adjusted to today's value, those two ships were carrying $1 billion in gold. During the entire California gold rush, the estimates are that about $2 billion of gold was found. So half of the total amount of the California gold rush is on the first two ships from the Yukon. When this news hits the newspapers and telegraphs, people went hysterical. On July 17th, the Seattle Post-Intelligencer ran a front-page headline in all capital letters, "Gold, gold, gold." The news of chunks of gold just laying on the ground will excite people at any time, but particularly now, Americans were primed for gold fever. By now, the glow of the California gold rush had long since faded. The 15-year economic boom had not only slowed, the United States was in some financial trouble. In the 1890s, there had been a series of financial recessions and bank failures leading to mass unemployment. And America was using the gold standard, meaning paper money was tied to how much gold the government physically had in hand. And that wasn't going well. People were hoarding gold because, hello, the banks are failing. People aren't comfortable with economic uncertainty. Having a large amount of physical gold in their possession seemed like an absolute dream come true to a lot of people. In 1 year, after those two ships came to harbor, 100,000 people tried to go mine the Yukon. It took California 6 years to amass 300,000 people from their gold rush. Getting to the Yukon was exceptionally difficult and dangerous, but the massive amount of people making the effort should indicate how powerful a motivator gold was to desperate people. Gold fever caused mass resignations of staff, which shut down many businesses in the continental U.S., even whole cities. In Seattle, the city was thrown into disarray when the mayor, 12 policemen, and most of the streetcar drivers abandoned their civic duties to go treasure hunting. The gold rush was a full cultural phenomenon. Branded clothing, equipment, food, etc. were all branded as Klondike. And think about it, we still do that nowadays. Think of like the North Face or Patagonia. We all like to feel connected to the wilderness. Now, technically, the Klondike Gold Rush was happening in Canada, but the borders of southeast Alaska had been murky and disputed between the United States, Britain, and Canada ever since the U.S. bought Alaska from Russia in 1867. But because of the remote area and the sheer number of American prospectors, the U.S. kind of got to steamroll in unhindered. The Canadians were able to draw some lines in the sand in areas they could control, like the shipping ports, at which point the prospectors had to cooperate with things like paying custom duties, however steep the price. The frenzy of the Klondike Gold Rush concluded almost as suddenly as it had burst into happening. The Spanish-American War began in 1898, which removed the gold rush updates from newspapers, cutting off a fresh supply of newly interested miners finding out about Yukon. And funnily, the boom towns of the rush, like Dawson City and Skagway, once known for their wild, lawless ways, were becoming more civilized and developed, even as their populations dropped and leveled off from boom height numbers. In August 1898, gold was found in Nome, Alaska, and many prospectors left the Yukon to seek new fortunes. The long-term consequences of the Klondike Gold Rush are mixed. Like in California, the economic boost brought new lines of communication and travel to places that would have otherwise stayed much longer isolated and underdeveloped. But also, as in the Golden State, the native indigenous populations suffered greatly. The Han people's numbers fell catastrophically from environmental damage to their rivers and forest, their traditional fishing and hunting grounds destroyed. They actually had to appeal to the Canadian government for aid to prevent dying of famine in 1904, thanks to the gold rush. Seattle really reaped rewards of the gold rush. It is what truly established Seattle as a major city. The year before the rush, Seattle's business receipts totaled $300,000. Spring of 1898, $25 million in just 8 months. In 2016, Seattle was home to 6 Fortune 500 companies, including Amazon, Starbucks, Costco, and Microsoft. Do we owe these massive global brands to the Yukon Gold Rush? The rush helped give Seattle the foundation to be the business powerhouse metropolis it now is. Maybe you can thank gold for your pumpkin spice latte and 2-day prime shipping. The American economy as a whole experienced a boost, much like it did after the California gold rush. The bank crises of the 1890s were able to be put in the rear view. The Canadian economy also experienced a 10-year gold supercharged period of prosperity. Aside from financial numbers, another benefit from the Klondike rush was establishing a relationship of cooperation between the U.S. and Canada. The establishment of smooth transcontinental rail traffic, moving ships of cargo and passengers through ports. Canada and the U.S. have a reputation for the longest peaceful border between nations, and that good relationship really solidified at this time. The Northern Gold Rush has greatly contributed to the development of the state of Alaska. Alaska was officially incorporated as an organized territory in 1912, though it didn't become the 49th U.S. state until 1959. Alaska was literally a cash cow. With America's economy on the gold standard, it was super awesome that Alaska was cranking out gold. But having the nation's money tied to physical gold was not a perfect situation, and the United States went off the gold standard in 1933 as part of trying to rebound from the Great Depression. But through the decades, Alaska has continued to sustain a high output of gold. In 2018, gold still accounted for 28% of all mining wealth from Alaska. America has always been a hungry nation. The United States perpetually wants to consume and spread and build, and gold is fuel for all these goals. Of course, the country is going to want to expand and claim land if it has valuable resources. And what is more valuable than gold? Not much. With money comes power and the opportunity to grow and develop other facets of an economy beyond just mining. Case in point, California has the largest economy of all 50 United States. And indeed, if California was its own country, it would have the 5th largest economy in the world. I submit that the greater gains from the gold rush came on the macro scale. What happened to California as a state and a culture, and in turn what that did for the United States. The California gold rush, it caused a rapid multicultural infusion into a small area. Gold created a super melting pot, setting California up to be an example of vibrant cultural fusion. Alaska saw its development as a sort of discovered piggy bank for America. The northern state funded and boosted the national economy on a grand scale. The gold boost from the north helped set America up to be in a good financial situation heading into the challenges of the early 1900s, like World War I. Looking beyond just America's direct history, gold is connected to so much of our human experience. How we show love and commitment with rings and jewelry. To crown our royalty and our winners, we still give gold medals to Olympic athletes. Gold has historically been at the center of religions. Gold has been divinely personified in multiple cultures. We still wear gold crosses around our necks. Gold is a motivator, sending people across seas to unknown lands, expanding borders of nations and explorers, simply putting foot to ground to hunt lost treasures. Gold motivates not just physical seeking, but the lure of gold spurred mankind to experiment and wonder about the natural world. The side effect was not really synthetic precious metals, but the foundation of modern chemistry, with some notable scientific discoveries along the way. And with all these grand philosophical concepts, historical events, and thousands of cultural artifacts, there really is nothing like the feeling of hanging your own gold chain around your neck, slipping on a beloved ring or a pair of earrings. Gold is beautiful, and we love it. Always have, and always will. For that fact, a golden thread will stay woven tightly to human history. So that concludes our series, A Casual History of Gold. It has truly been my pleasure to walk through these last 4 episodes with you. I mentioned in the introduction to the series back in episode 8 that I wanted this series to feel like I came in and sat down in your living room with a glass of wine to chat about gold. I suppose at this point we would have finished the whole bottle. Please reference the show notes for a link to our website, which has transcripts for all Tea and Gemstones episodes and the bibliography. Check out our Instagram to leave me some feedback on what you think of the series or what you'd like for a future podcast episode. Our theme song is by Joseph McDade. As always, I have been your host, Jennifer, and until next time, stay sparkly.